Hey everyone, Nick Ottinger here with Team Conti Sim Performance this week in Xfinity Series at Portland International Raceway. This is our track guide for our race run. I've done a 15 lap run for a baseline that is also in the notes for you guys to track. So I'm gonna let this play for about 2 or 3 laps. No, just some raw filter of just laps running through, and then we'll dissect and debrief together on each corner characteristic, some attributes that you need to think on, traits, characteristics that we just obviously need to run through and understand this racetrack. So with that said, I'm gonna let this play through. All right, let's go back a lap here, and we will use this lap to break down each corner, attributes we need to think on for what each corner presents. So, with that said, I'm gonna bring my webcam on, and we're gonna work through this together. So, hello. Now, let's think about our start finish line, the speed we need to carry in a turn one braking, right? So, all our speed for this front straight that we're just on right here is all going to come down from our turn 12 exit, right? You know, the wheel spin that we are trying to limit on exit to turn 12 to the start finish line. And with our preferred gear, we're going to be in a 411. Okay, this is what I prefer just to keep some tire longevity past 15 to 20 to 25 stage. And our race is a 34 lap race. So you should have a lot of capability in keeping your tires on it. And that should be a real focal point for a track like this that has such aggressive, I would say, kind of characteristic of every type of road course corner you can have. Some hairpin corners and long sweeping corners and some switchback corners. So let's go into turn one here. Let's slow it down. And I'm going to stop right here. You notice our 700 marker right here. This is a tool I use. You know, I don't try to use a lot of markers at ovals, but road courses are absolutely necessary in my opinion. And this should be relatively around your lift point for turn one. Now you can coast a little earlier, you could do whatever you need, but this is all the setup for your braking phase at the 600 marker or just before the 600 marker. And the characteristic that you need to do is get majority of your braking done. This is a passing zone. This is absolutely a passing zone for, I would say, even kind of outbraking yourself. So just because someone's showing a nose don't mean they're actually going to be able to dive into that corner in turn one. But this is one of the few areas where you're going to have passing on the track, turn one and turn seven. So it's a tricky corner approach. You should approach it with the mindset that your peak brake pressure will be more early into this braking phase. So let's slow this up a little bit. And you can see here, I'm downshifting from fourth to third at this point. And now my point of what I'm looking to do is straight line braking into here and use some of the engine revs that I'm going to, create with a higher RPM downshift from third to second and just not get the second too early. But I'm well into the 600 phase, going to slow this down even more. And you can see I'm not exceeding about 85-90% brake. I'm still into 400 marker straight line braking, okay? And this whole phase, I'm going to downshift a second right there. And once I get to the 200 marker, where we're about right here, it's going to be my turn away from the wall a little bit. It's not going to be a sharp turn. It's going to be a gradual turn to set up for when I actually start using more wheel input, I can be completely almost off the brake and make sure it's the least resistance on the front tires. I'm trying to create that opportunity. So let's slow it down, past the 200 sign, turning away from the wall, and watch my brake pedal. The more wheel input I add, the less brake pedal I'm trying to achieve because I don't want to just dump all this load to the left right here. And in this section, let's look at it like Watkins Glen, okay? The bus stop in Watkins Glen. You're trying to use all that excess curbing at the Glen to get close to the wall or the guardrail there. And your objective is the same thing here. But for us to have the right approach, our turn one, obviously it's the first part of, our corner of the chicane, So it's the heaviest, I would say, relatively the heaviest braking zone, and one you're going to have the most amount of crashes in. Okay, it's just what's going to happen. People are going to miss the mark. It's going to miss the chicane. But to really hit this section correct, like Watkins Glen, you're going to want to get the brake and be off the brakes before you reach the front tires into this curbing right here. Okay, and let's look at it. Let's slow it up. You're going to hit the curbing right now, and you want to try to get off this brake before you get into this section of the curbing, because that is the tallest part of the curbing, and that's going to help you set up for your turn two. Okay, and now your objective, as my objective would be, it's pretty simple, of making sure we're trying to find our minimum speed for our turn two angle. And you can notice I'm on the brake right now. The wheel is obviously to the right, so my directional change back to the left is very important. So we got to make sure we're hitting the apex correct. We're making sure we're really honing in on what we're looking at this curbing. So for turn two, it's a corner that rewards finding your minimum speed earlier, before you get to this curbing, okay? So let's slow it down. You can see I'm using a lot of heavy braking still, and my directional change back to the left is still aggressive, but my wheel input is quite a lot, and I'm finding that point before I get to this, pavement change color that you see, where I'm off the brake. Now I'm going to use the top of this curbing as a tool, right? But I'm not going to put the inside of the left front on the downward side of this slope of curbing. I'm not going all the way to the inside because I don't want to hit this curbing and then just go straight, right? I want to hit just the top of it, so I'm just rebounding off of it. And also the left rear is going to do the same quality. So I'm in the throttle a little bit here, as you can see. My objective is to get to the throttle earlier. It's just what it is. Get to the throttle earlier, use all this momentum I'm carrying. Second gear with the 411 I think is pretty good for creating full throttle. And now, once you do your switch back to the right, another important quality. Once you get to this curbing, you're not going to stay 100% throttle. If you do that, you're going to spin the left rear tire for one, because it's taking a lot of the load to that, side, and you're trying to actually get the car back straight. You're trying to generate a straight exit here. So if you're just driving offline, that's the first thing you should not do. You should be trying to make sure you got the correct angle once you hit this curbing, and then make sure you're actually straightening the exit as much as you can. So if you got to do that 60% throttle, 40% throttle, 10% throttle, it's fine. As long as you get off that curbing to make sure you're not all the way into the grass here, because this is your section that is going to take you to turn 4, and all that momentum you're going to carry into turn 4 is very important not to take away. So let's break this down a little bit more. I'm going to stay in second here. 411, this whole section from turn 1 all the way to turn 7 is going to be in second. Okay, let's preface that already so you have a good understanding of it. So now our braking into turn 4, some heavy braking just to make sure we're setting the nose, and when we trail off that brake, again, like we treated turn 1 on a directional change to the right, we're trying to make sure we're keeping the front to not have the most resistance to it. So if I add more wheel input, more brake, we know it's going to add more resistance. So I want to get a good understanding of this for you guys as well, is when we go through turn 4, this is our really triple apex corner set of corners that we have. Okay, so it's a fast right-hander. We're gonna get all our braking done as much as we can earlier, and once we get through this phase of getting off the brake, I want you to see when I show it on the screen here of how we can create momentum back to the corner, because when we actually get to the throttle in the middle of turn 4, we're going to use that as a point to maintain maintenance throttle, stay partial throttle, in other words. So that is going to be a reference for us to use the tire line. So let's slow this down. Slowing it down, more wheel input, get to this curbing, see the brake pedal. I'm using a tire line like I just mentioned, right? Turn 4, and we're going to sweep this all the way into, again, it's a triple apex corner, essentially is what it is. Partial throttle. See all this partial maintenance throttle I'm carrying, keeping a tighter line for that second set of curbings. And I use this curbing as a point to make sure that's my furthest point I want to get, so I can get into this last set of apex for turn 4 and 5. Okay, so we just worked through turn 4. We're really getting to turn 5 right here, and this is going to help that set up for turn 5. And we're going to use a little bit of brake, as you can see, just to make sure our minimum speed is met. We don't want to use the brake later into this section, because if we drive into this section, all we're going to do is take our minimal speed and delay the momentum we're carrying through the right-hander of turn 5. So let's slow this down some more. You can see I'm going to be the partial throttle here and use the top of this curbing as a good tool so I can start straightening the exit of turn 5 into turn 6. So this is the switchback I've kind of referenced a couple times, the switchback direction, that we have. This is a corner that is, I would say, a corner that's going to reward a tighter radius and hugging the curbing. Okay, so we're straight line braking at this point. You can see my wheels, it may not look straight, but the car is tracking straight. And then once I start releasing the brake pedal, I'm going to start getting some front capability back. So this start of the left side curbing for turn 6 is a tool for us. It's a tool for me that, okay, that is where I want to make sure my car is pointing. The front end's pointing here, right? I'm going to be using a little brake, have a little bit of a rolling phase, and once I get to the center of this turn 6 zone, I think it is advantageous for me as a driver to understand, okay, I'm in a rolling phase. Now I need to make sure I'm keeping the car pointed at the center to the mid exit of this off-camber corner that we're going to have on exit of 6. So what we're going to do is going to use enough throttle to maintain some minimal speed back, and use some maintenance throttle when we're going to start opening the wheel up once we're getting off this curbing. Okay, you can see him opening the wheel up. You can see the whole reference point of throttle. I'm not using too much throttle. And that's because this section, if I venture all the way out here, it's just going to slip the right rear tire. And when we slip that right rear tire, all you're doing is just inducing a little bit of heat to the right rear, but also taking some wear away and capability of it in the long run. So it's better to have a tighter radius in this section and not even have to get to 100% throttle. So let's go through this at half speed. You can see I'm not going to be full throttle because the car needs to be balanced in this section. That's just what it needs to have. You know, this is that corner exit of turn 6 is a balance and trait of what you need to have for first lap until you complete the race. So the first lap to the 34th lap. It is, in short, take the shortest distance possible. Okay, I know I referenced that in the notes. You could also, I think, is a key point to remember is to avoid the outside of the corner. That we just referenced the turn 6 curbing on exit and how it off cambers. That is why you want to. It often is too off cambered for that right rear tire, and then as a driver you're going to try to regain speed with being in the throttle more, and that's just going to be worse. You're going to be slipping the rear tires. So don't lose time doing that. Just hug a tighter apex and keep the apex tight and hold the exit how you need to. So if people want to overdrive that section, let them overdrive it, because that's going to hurt their section into, obviously, our turn 7 that we're at right now, okay? So when I think about turn 7, it is additionally a heavy braking zone. You got to find your turning point, and how we can really get off the brake is dependent on you as a driver, okay? We're going to be in a straight line braking phase. It's crucial to get the car settled, that we're just through turn 6 exit. Get the car settled for our braking phase. Let's watch this. Find our turning point. It is the most difficult corner, in my opinion, at this racetrack, because it is very hard to see your apex. So what you're doing, what I look for is, I'm in this straight line braking phase. I see this wide open space here. Would not want to be all the way out here, okay? I want to make sure my apex is hitting this curbing, and I'm inching closer to it so I can ultimately have a straighter exit into the on-throttle side of the lap. You can see I used just enough brake to get off, at my max wheel angle. My minimum speed is met, and keeping the front turning. I know I have the turn that I need, and now my mindset is switched. In this section, I'm going to be partial throttle and make sure the right sides are just inside of the peak of this curbing, okay? The outside of the right side tires is just what I want to be right there on that curbing. Now, my mindset has shifted. In the on-throttle side of the lap, it's shifted to timing the throttle to 100%, okay? I know I'm going to be partial throttle at this stage. It's obviously, I'm at max wheel angle. We're still through a corner apex. So what we're doing is we're opening up that capability now with that later apex we did, and driving straight off the corner with as much throttle as we can. So let's do it at a quarter speed. I'm going to use as much distance as I can and open the exit up so I can start my linear partial phase of the throttle. And now the car's settled straight. My eyes are actually forward now, that I'm feeling if I have any wheel slip, it's because I got to 100% throttle too early. So this part early is where you're going to dissect that you can get to 100% throttle. But once you get past that 5-lap stage, you're really going to manage your on throttle and be in partial throttle all the way through here. So I'm shifting up to third relatively at the right spot here between these, this directional change to the right. Now here, it's really what you feel comfortable with balance-wise and gear selection. But obviously, I'm in third gear at the moment, and how you approach this corner is considerably rewarding. if you have the patience to not just cut this entry too much. As you can see here, I'm correcting the wheel back to the left, right? So I induced a little bit of left rear wheel slip, and the rear tire's a little, slipping at this moment. Now, that's a quality that's just going to be hard to mitigate. And the only way to mitigate that is obviously just not to be in the throttle too much in this stage and using too much wheel input to this actual radius. But there's a couple things you could do here. You can actually not hug this corner as much as you want for turn 8 here. You can stay in the middle of the track. You can actually get as close as you can to make this straight, but start opening the exit up, as you see I just did briefly, and keep it at the center of the track. Or you can simply go all the way right here. Get close to this line and make sure you're not tugging the wheel and breaking the car free. So let's slow this down, do it at full speed, and you can see how I'm opening that exit up a little bit. 1/4 gear. Now this stage, really important. This is, in a combination of things, I think it's probably the most difficult section of the track in trying to get your braking phase here, and then really dive into the minimal speed side of what you need to carry to the left hand for turn 9. Okay, so we obviously lifted around the 500 mark. We're going into the 400 mark, and we're already into the braking, right? A downshift to the third, and my point, what we're going to achieve is going to be in the second. Second gear is what we're looking to have somewhere around the 200 marker, again, like for turn 1, okay? And we're going to do all our braking in a straight line as much as we can. This is where you really are going to have a lot of different handling traits under braking because of how this wall is actually starting parallel with how you're actually braking, and then it's going to veer to the left. So this can make your lap or break your lap concretely. And I don't mean to put a pun because of the concrete wall next to us, but that's really what can happen, because you can see how much it's going to start veering to the left. And let's slow this up. And once we get to this 200 marker, we're going to start inching away a little bit. I do a little bit of a later downshift out of 200, but at the 100 logo, or the sign on the wall, you can see I'm starting to actually fully turn away from it. And let's look at the braking. This section is going to get light with the brake. You want to make sure you're not taking too much speed away, because you don't want to have to get in a throttle too heavy once you're rolling through this section. This zone, probably the most precise you have to be in making sure you're not too far left. And then once you get through this corner, you're not too far right. Okay? So how we can reference this, I think, is making sure once we get to this left-hand curbing that you see on the screen here, the inside of the left front tire, you do not want to be to the left side of the curbing, okay? What that's going to do is that's going to induce a quality of the splitter hitting, and you're going to slide that splitter, and that's going to slide the front end straight, okay? And that's the same thing on the right-hand curbing. That's going to happen as well. So making sure you have the car, you don't want the car to feel unsettled in this section, okay? So finding your limited braking that you can use, timing that downshift to second is going to be vital. Back to your directional change to the right. Now, let's slow this up, and you can see I'm angling straight as I can. And look, I put the inside of the left front on that actual curbing, the height of this curbing I was talking about at the peak of it, because I put the inside of the left front tire in this patch. So now what's happening is I'm hitting the splitter, and I get offline a little bit. But luckily, I have the grip to be able to do that, on the first set of laps. Later on, you're not going to have that quality. So I'm able to fix that, get in the throttle a little bit to pick the front end up a little bit. And now my directional change back to the right, I don't want to have the same quality, because it's even worse if I do it in this right-hand section of turn 10. So I don't want to hit it and get offline, because if I hit it at the wrong point, I'm going to be off in the grass here. So that's why it's very important to manage your risk in this section and just make sure you get the line correct. And Additionally, make sure you're just not hitting those curbings and cutting them too much, because here's your change to 11, and you can see how much I'm going to start braking in this stage while I'm actually setting up for my right hand corner. So the furthest point I want to be, I want to keep the car straight in this section right here. Once I get to the heavier part of the braking, I want to make sure the car is straight as possible. So I can actually limit my brake usage. You can see how I have that much brake. I'm clipping that curb into the left. And now we're going through 11 and 12 to where I'm putting the left sides ultimately as close as I can get to this paint, right? But the right side is going to be almost on top of this curbing. And if it is even further, you're going to slide out again. Now this is a reference of what we talked about earlier in the video. Our turn 12 exit is going to dictate our front straight speed, and that's going to transition into turn 1 with all our exit speed we have here. So what I really want us to focus towards in this section for turn 12, and additionally, is making sure we got that straight line braking that we just referenced so we can get off the brake and transition to the gas that you see here, and holding partial throttle until you start opening the wheel up, and then understanding now you're going to put a lot of stress to the left rear tire. You're going to put a lot of stress to the right rear tire, but you're going to put a lot of stress to the left rear tire first, and inducing a lot of wheel spin. So think of this as an exit. I know it may feel different, it may look different, but obviously it's a direction that is not similar to New Hampshire, but this is the exact zone that you see here, the line that I'm circling here. That is the exact zone of what you're trying to achieve at a New Hampshire. You're trying to load the left rear and right rear at the same portion, the same rate of, so you can start opening the wheel up and exit as faintly as much as you can to the wall with a minimal wheel input, but also minimal wheel slip. So that's your objective. You're trying to keep the wheel straight and use that linear throttle and just open it all the way up to the wall that we just did right there. Okay, so that is a lengthy description of Portland, of how I would attack each corner, the attributes of them, or what you can have mindset wise, what we should be looking for. Now, if you use a 430 gear, 444 gear, maybe you have a lot more capability to slow the car down to where you don't have to use so much brake in each section. So you're going to use more of the actual gear ratio to help slow you down. So that is some qualities you're going to have as well. But let's look at our fall off. We just dissected lap 2, which was a pretty efficient lap, I would say, for all things considered. And look at the fall off we have. Almost 2 seconds of fall off in 15 laps, okay? So maybe that 430 gear is going to help you not fall off as much. It's going to help this longevity side of just staying in the correct gear and keeping the RPMs in the right range. But let's go look at our last lap. I'm going to have this in chase perspective and just let this play through for you guys. You can see the difference in qualities that we just have. Same braking in at 600 marker. Gonna try to get close to the wall, slow our apex down, stay a little bit further left, keep this section as straight as possible, limit full throttle at the moment. Use this as fast momentum section. Triple apex, obviously, that we have. And then turn 5, straight line brake a little bit here. Mentioned we didn't want to get too far off cambered here. And to turn 7, off the brake right now, straighten the exit up so we can get to 100%. Here's our corner, how we're opening up this exit a little bit. It's perfectly fine to do that. That's a pretty clean section there. I would say this is a pretty clean lap 15 for just hitting the marks how you should and just getting the most out of the lap, really. But all right, so that's 15 laps. That is a pretty efficient 15 lap out of 1579. So we talked about not overshooting turn one, talked about every dang corner as we normally do. But I can't stress enough on how much it is just important just to hit the line. Make sure we hit the correct apex angle, holding your apexes, and not just if you feel like you can get 200% throttle, don't just get 200% throttle. You're going to add a lot more time to get the rear tires hooked up and then that's going to hurt longevity of it. So that's going to do it for us this week at Portland. I would definitely appreciate some feedback on maybe what you guys would like to see more of. What I'm also going to do for these track guides or when we go to ovals is inducing some pit stops for you guys. So yeah, if you guys got any questions, please reach out to us at Team Conti Sim Performance. I'll help you guys on Xfinity side. So any questions, always here to help. Have a good one this week, gentlemen.